Thanks for tuning in to the Mission Matters podcast, where we feature successful, mission-driven leaders committed to creating a positive change in the world. Our mission with this channel is to inspire other leaders by providing industry insights, new ideas, and inspiring stories from the pros.
All right, welcome back. I'm Paul Fyth, host of this show where I talk with leaders heading up mission-focused organizations, leading from the heart, inspiring others, and making a difference in our communities. Episode, of course, is sponsored by none other than PGM, acronym for Paul Gregory Media, certified B Corporation, and they are devoted to nonprofit marketing. To learn more about what PGM does and what a B Corporation is, not many people do, visit paulgregorymedia.com. I have with us for our guest today, Vicky Joseph. She is the founder of Families Helping Families right here in Naperville. And they provide apartments and volunteer mentors to homeless families in DuPage County while they're working to reclaim their lives through education. And she's been with the organization. Well, she started the organization back in '94. So congratulations on 30 years.
Thank you. It's been a journey.
I bet it has. And I bet you have some war stories in those 30 years. I'd love to learn your journey. What were you doing before Families Helping Families, and what led you there, and what was the reason that said, okay, this is what I need to do?
Well, my family's Jewish, and my mother is a Holocaust survivor from the Netherlands. And she was, her life and her family's life was saved by a Dutch resistance worker who was actually 19 at the time. Her name was Jeanne, Jeanne Alsoren. And I was very lucky that I got to know Jeanne, of course, many years later, and her family. And there was always a sense of responsibility and give back in my family. None of us, certainly my mother wouldn't have been alive. I wouldn't have been born. My kids wouldn't have been born. My grandkids wouldn't have been born. And Jeanne risked her life. The least I could do was to help people that needed help. Certainly isn't life-threatening, but it's my small way of saying thank you to the one very important lady that saved my family.
Wow. And so you've had this mindset that it sounds like you kind of grew up with. And what led you to this particular organization?
Well, when I brought my first baby home from the hospital, that baby's now 38. I remember feeling, what must that be like if I didn't have a home to come home to, and a wonderful, supportive husband, and it's such a fragile feeling when you first bring that little 6-pound child home, and so that was noodling at me. That's my word, that I needed to do something. And so when my second child went off to kindergarten, I decided this is my time. I got to figure out what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to do something. Got to itch that nuggle. And so I started interviewing people in the Naperville area to find out what they were doing. And I ran across transitional housing. A lovely nun from St. Thomas, Sister Marlene, agreed to speak with me. She's the one that introduced me initially. But she said it was being done through Catholic churches, and that wasn't going to work for me. So she also mentioned Bridge Communities was doing this. So I then went to Bridge, and they said, "Oh, okay, sure. We've just started this program. Join us." And we adopted one family, lovely lady named Diana and her 2 little girls, and we're still very close. They live in Mississippi now, but she and the 4 kids were just here visiting last month, staying with us. So the time was right. The time was right to start it and grow it. And it grew kind of organically. I mean, when I started, it was this one family, Diana and her girls, and the kids and I rollerbladed in the neighborhood, put a flyer in each mailbox, and said, "Can you help us? We want to adopt one family." And my goal was to raise enough for a year of rent and utilities, which was $8,000 at the time. And we raised almost that much. And from there, more volunteers stepped up and money came in. And at this point, we have 12 families.
Wow. That's some great growth. I'm trying to figure out how to ask this next question, because I think the questions on a lot of people's minds is you talk about bridge communities and families helping families. How does that fit into that? You were talking about something about program partners.
Yeah, Bridge works with about 35 program partners, and almost all of them are churches.
Mm-hmm.
So transitional housing is a line item for a church that does a lot of good outreach, but this is all we do. So Bridge provides the screening and the case management, but it's my volunteer mentors who are there every week with their client, and they're with them the whole couple of years. The client's with us, and they become unpaid life consultants. Sometimes the only positive, trusting relationship that a mom may have ever had. The mom has to get used to trusting. That can take a while. Been a lot of trauma in most of their lives, so trust doesn't come easily. And the mentors, one of the big jobs is financial literacy. I mean, a lady we interviewed 2 days ago that needs housing has a credit score of 492. That's on an 850 point scale.
Mm.
You're not going to get a loan. You're not going to be able to buy a car, or if you do, you'll pay 29% interest. So that's one of the first things we started on, is there are wonderful tools out there. How do you build your credit? How do you learn to budget? How do you repay debt? So all of those things that mentors are working with clients on every week.
Nice. So the services that Families Helping Families provides is these life coaches, these mentors. And then you mentioned that financial literacy is one of the biggest areas that you need to tackle. But you also mentioned apartments. So you're providing housing.
The apartments are owned by Bridge Communities, and
Mhm.
Bridge is an unbelievable partner to us. I mean, the case managers are professional, and they have a lot of resources that we can draw from. We rent from Bridge then every month, and we pay far less than market rate, because market rate for a non-luxurious apartment, 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, no swimming pool, no tennis court, is $1,700 or $1,800 a month.
Right.
So we pay less than market rate, and so Bridge Communities does their own fundraising, so that we can pay less than market rent. So it's a wonderful synergy.
Nice.
We're very grateful for that partnership.
Yeah, a partnership indeed, and going both ways.
Yes.
We talked a little bit about this before we started recording, which is, I always like to go over, what are some of the challenges of working with this particular organization? As I meet with founders and presidents and executive directors, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of, we had joked before that you're not a particular good fan of governance, right? And not many people are, but I happen to love it. And so that could be one, but we had talked about one of your biggest challenges that you see day to day. Talk to us a little bit about that.
And I mentioned it before. It's the amount of trauma that our families have been through. And then we ask so much of them. They have meetings with us. They have budgeting. They have to prepare a budget every week before we meet with them. They've got so many follow-up phone calls to people to creditors, people they owe money to. They work. Most of them work full-time and go to school part-time, or work part-time, go to school full-time. And they're single moms, most of them. So they have very, very busy lives. And when we layer on that the natural responsibilities of this program, it's a lot. It's a lot. I worry. When I think, could I handle that? Could I have been a single mom to my 2 active kids and worked full-time and gone to school part-time and followed all the rules of the program? I'm not sure I would have had it in me. So it's expecting a lot, and you have to expect a lot. I mean, people donate money to us so that we can pay rent for these families so that they can improve their lives and their kids' lives. So it's a delicate dance, is what I'm trying to say, between expecting a realistic amount of work and progress for these families, and yet understanding that they've got tremendous pressures in their lives.
They do. And you could even argue that this adds to that, but
it does.
It's not an easy fix. But if you go through the program, it sounds like if you come out on the other side, you're a much better person for so many reasons, but the least of which, financial literacy alone.
Our client, Mai, graduated 10 days ago with her nursing degree. And she had a rocky road, but she stuck with it and got through it. Our client, Gloria, last month was able to buy a home. And, it's little and it needs some rehab, but it's hers. And she and her little 2-year-old Leah are going to have it for their lifetime if they want to stay there. So we see a lot of progress, but it's a lot of stops and starts, and our mentors have to be so patient, and there has to be a lot of grace on both sides. The mentors have to give the client some space and understand what support looks like to that client, what resonates with them, what helps. And the client has to understand that that we don't always have all the answers, but that we're on their team. Whatever they need, we want to help them get there. It's their goals. We don't set the goals. It's their goals. But then we're going to hold their feet to the fire to get there.
Yeah. Well, there's got to be that accountability element, right? And
we just can't take donors' money without having a tightly run program with real goals. I don't want to donate my money to places that I feel don't help people change their lives.
Yeah. Well, that's not a motive connection, right? If you're going to change somebody's life, there's an easy argument to be made for that. If you believe the funds are being used, wisely.
And there's one truth throughout the 30 years of the hundreds of clients I've known. They all want something better for their children. They don't ever want their children to be in a position they were in where there's no roof over their head.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to ask you about one other child. I wasn't going to, but I want to because I think it's important. Because a lot of nonprofit organizations, even in DuPage County or the Chicagoland area, are 100% volunteer driven, as you were, until recently.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and what led to that decision.
Yeah. So I've been running Families Helping Families for 29 years. And we have the most amazing, wonderful, talented volunteers. But I was very aware that as I approached 70, I want this to go on. And we needed to organize ourselves in a way that we could. And I wasn't the person to do that. That is governance, for example, policies and procedures. Those are not my strengths. So we got very, very lucky that Suzanne Thibault, who'd been a volunteer mentor for us, and then went on to work for Bridge as a case manager, and then she managed the case managers, then she became manage all programs. When I asked her if she would consider being our executive director, she said that would be her dream job. So I got very lucky to have such a strong executive director, strong in both the soft side, which is what I'm good at, and the details and the policies and procedures. So it was a matter of planning for the future. That was the only way I knew to do it. And I think it's been the right decision, though we had been so proud for 29 years of having, no overhead of any kind. Everything we spent was client focused. But I talked to some of our larger donors and said, how would you feel about that? And they said, well, it's about time.
Yes, that's the right answer.
Yeah.
You can't scale or have succession planning or any of those things without some sort of structure in place. And you guys just became a 501c3 this year, right?
We operated under the Bridge Community's 501c3 for 30 years. We got our own 501c3 July 1st.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got that structure in place. You've got a paid employee and executive director now who is good at all those things.
She's great.
And so there's a clear path for succession planning and keeping the organization servicing our community. And what a service that is.
Well, it's the best way I know for a mom to figure out a way for her children to have a better life. I mean, it gives her a couple of years where she doesn't have to worry about rent and utilities, where she can increase her education and value in the marketplace. She can work on promotions. Her kids can really thrive in our wonderful Naperville schools, and there's private tutoring that Bridge Communities provides for them. There's a real wraparound service mentality here, and that's the way you change your life. But it's a process.
Well, you mentioned a couple of years. This is like a 2-year program?
And it can be longer. If we've got a mom who's started with no college and wants to be a nurse, that doesn't happen in 2 years. You've got to have a lot of prereqs before you can even get into a potential 2-year program. And then, of course, what you'd really like is a bachelor's of science in nursing so that you can work in a hospital setting. So it can be longer than 2 years, but it has to be somebody who's very goal-oriented and making a lot of progress.
Yeah. Well, very, very interesting. And I have to admit, while I've heard of Bridge Communities, I haven't heard of that program of families helping families. And like you said, they have like 30 some odd program partners.
But they're churches, and a normal church would have one family they support, or maybe two.
Right.
And we've got 12. So again, this is all we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Churches do a lot of good things, but this is all we do.
Yeah. Well, that is amazing.
One of the really rewarding things too is to see how these relationships transcend time. So I'm still in touch again with our very first client, Diana, and that was 30 years ago. So many of our mentors are still part of the family. And the former client will still call and say, I really need to make a decision about such and such. What do you think?
Yeah, you become that sounding board every once in a while. Well, there's a relationship that's been built there. You've gone through some hard times, and they were at the lowest point of their lives. And, those relationships are going to be strong, I would think, coming out of that.
Well, and Bridge has done a lot of studies on what leads success for a client. And it always comes back to the strength of the relationship with the mentors. So
no surprise.
Our mentors they're fabulous. And the client decides that. If they graduate from the program and those couple of years were not something they want to remember, being in a program for homeless families, that's okay. But if they want to keep that relationship going, the mentors are always very happy to do that.
Good to know. Well, thank you for being on the show. I've learned quite a bit today, and happy to have learned all the things that Helping Families is doing. Any parting thoughts for our listeners out there?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. You decide when you're volunteering if you want to help a lot of people a little bit, like volunteering at Loaves and Fishes, which I do, or if you want to help a few people a lot. And we're the helping a few people a lot. So I would encourage anybody who might be interested in mentoring, I would love to hear from them. We are always looking for mentors. It's not for sissies. It's a big commitment, and it doesn't always work, but it's rewarding. And the proof in that pudding is that our mentors come back for many, many years because one client graduates, they want to mentor the next one.
Okay.
So we would love to talk to anybody who thinks this is something that speaks to them.
Well, I have 2 questions about that then. Do mentors need any particular training or background?
There is mentor training that's provided and ongoing mentor training.
Okay.
Background, you have to have the heart for it. And you always would mentor with a partner, and then you'd have a senior mentor on your team until you and your partner are, feeling comfortable. There's a lot of support. So
Okay.
you need the heart for it.
Yeah.
Is
Well, because you're dealing with people at the lowest point in their lives, and there's trauma and there's trust issues, and you have to have that. I think I love the word you used in the beginning, the grace. You have to have the grace to flex a little bit with that particular family. The other question I had then for you regarding mentors, because I definitely want to promote the fact that you're looking for mentors. Who is the typical mentor demographically in your organization?
The typical mentor. Well, actually, recently it's changed a little bit. It was always women in the past. Occasionally there'd be a man or a couple, but 3 of our mentor teams now are couples, which is lovely. It's so nice for the client and the client's children to see a great male role model, because frankly, they wouldn't be in a program for homeless families if the dad had stepped up. So it's wonderful that these male. I stopped in on a meeting a couple of months ago, and the mentor team, Bill and Nancy. Bill was on the floor playing a game with the 8-year-old little girl. That's really important role modeling.
Yeah. Well, that's great. All right. So it's good to know that Families Helping Families is looking for mentors.
Yeah. And most of our mentors age-wise would be between, 40 and 75. It's pretty wide. Again, it's a matter of having the heart for it and the time, because it is time consuming.
Yeah. Well, plus at that age range, you've had some experience under your belt and know a thing or two.
Yeah. We've occasionally had people in their early 20s that were interested in mentoring, and we've said, that's probably not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a little more life experience. Exactly.
Yeah. A couple more failures in life to know how to.
Oh, you're so right. You're so right.
Very interesting. Okay. Well, thanks again for being on the show. Learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did too. Till next time, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Mission Matters podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.